mattered. Her life had value. She deserved to live.
That was the father of Brooke Stratton, a McFarland woman who was found dead in a retention pond in 2024.
The man who killed her, James Barnes Morris, was sentenced to 15 years in prison today.
WMTV's Cameron Kelly joins us live from Brooke's Memorial in Madison. Cameron, Barnes Morris pleaded guilty to first-degree reckless homicide back in December in connection to Brooke's death.
That's right. And today, family and friends packed out the courtroom for Stratton, wearing her favorite color, purple. Stratton's parents, they stood before the court and they shared a lot about their daughter's character, as well as shared their pain over the last 2 years.
Forgiveness and justice can coexist.
A heartbroken father stands before the court.
I have struggled with grief, depression, disrupted sleep, and diminished focus.
The man who killed his daughter, Brooke Stratton, in 2024 was sentenced.
I do sentence you to a prison term of 25 years.
26-year-old James Barnes Morris addressed the family after attorneys weighed in on the sentencing.
Deeply ashamed and embarrassed of what happened. My committed actions was reckless and caused her death. I'm terribly, terribly sorry. I think about her every day. I'm sad that she's not able to spend time with her great family that loves her very much. Hope she's happy and healthy on the other side.
Stratton's family continues to focus on healing.
No sentence will bring her back. But sentencing matters. It reflects the value of the life that was taken.
The community really loves Brooke Stratton. They have a memorial here for her. It was built shortly after she passed away. It has the color purple, her favorite color, some stuffed animals, some pictures, and some candles. For now, reporting in Madison, Cameron Kelly, WMTV 15 News.
All right, Cameron, thank you. If you or a loved one is in an abusive relationship and you do need help, you can call the DAYS hotline at 608-251-4445.